hustling, by doing the only thing I knew how to do, doors opened for me that I couldn't have otherwise imagined.
While other people are focused on impressing each other, people like me are winning on LinkedIn. Why? Because it's all about connecting.
I couldn't breathe if I wasn't an entrepreneur.
Welcome to the Startup Gambit, presented by Haste and Hustle. I'm Shauna Arnott, founder and CEO of Haste and Hustle.
And I'm Devon Codrington, COO of Haste and Hustle. And today's guest is the fabulous Bob Gauvreau. He is a business finance expert, and we are very excited to have him here today. Can't wait to get into things. Before we jump into Bob and have him tell us what he does and how he does it so well, we're going to take a second to hear from our sponsor.
What if I'm not ready?
What if I don't have all the answers?
What if I just keep going?
What if it doesn't go as expected?
What if this setback helps me see the bigger picture?
What if I realize how far I've come?
What if I remember I'm doing the best I can with what I've got?
Today,
I'm
ready for what if.
Get ready for what if. Meridian, where banking feels good.
All right, we're back. Welcome, everybody. Bob, how are you doing? I love your blazer there. It looks really, really good in the background with the ambient lighting. It's a good setup. Welcome.
Very sharp.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This is what a great setup. This is good. No, life is good. Business is good. Clients are amazing. Friends are good. You know, life couldn't really be much better aside from this global pandemic that we're sitting in. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I love hearing that. That's all really good news aside from the pandemic. And yeah, this is great. Well, I'm so happy that you're joining us today. We've had interactions and different interviews in the past, and I've always gotten so much value from what you've had to share. And I know that what you are going to share with our audience today is going to be so valuable, especially, as people are going through the pandemic and they need business finance advice. And, this is a little more geared towards our Canadian audience. So if you are American, stay tuned because there's great principles that Bob will teach, but there's definitely a few key Canadian pieces of content in here as well. So with that, I'm going to let you take the reins and introduce yourself and just share a little bit about your background and tell our audience who you are, where you originated, and how you got to where you are now and where you're headed.
Yeah. No, well, that's how long do we have? Because I could probably go on for a little too long.
All right, take a few minutes.
All right. No, this is great. Bob Gauvreau, founding partner at Gopro CPA. We have a traditional CPA firm that we founded originally, and it's kind of evolved into more of we still have that piece, right? Accounting, tax, bookkeeping, but it's evolved into more of a proactive advice, business guidance, helping people grow and scale their businesses through good financial understanding and outlining a map to allowing them to understand what it takes to go from where they are right now to realizing their financial goals. So as a bit of a background though, I started my business in 2008, ultimately left a national accounting firm because I just felt like I was meant to work with entrepreneurs. And anyone who's ever worked in a CPA firm, the better you get at your job, the more you get pushed into large files where there's more complex transactions and more sophisticated users. So I was at the point where I was doing audits or financial reviews of boards of CPAs, right? That do their job every single day, 365. And I was trying to look for little holes or recommendations for them to improve their job. And that really wasn't what I was excited about. What I wanted to do was work with the business owners, the entrepreneurs who are creating something special and helping them understand, because they don't necessarily have the financial background that I do and the experience that I have. So helping them understand their finances, which can really deliver high value financial performance in their company. And the reason that I do that is because if we're all here to make an impact, we need to make sure that we're financially sustainable so we can reinvest and help more people. So that's ultimately the foundation of Gopro CPA. And where are we going? We've been ranked on the fastest growing companies in Canada list with the Globe and Mail and with Canadian Business over the last couple of years. So we're definitely growing and scaling towards being the, I'm going to say Canadian leader, but maybe even North American leader in the entrepreneurial space, doing CPA services and providing financial guidance to entrepreneurs, again, to help them grow and scale and increase their impact. So hopefully that was condensed enough, but I'm super excited about it. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's
great.
funny because you often think of, accountants as very like quiet and reserved and focused and all these things, but you have such a big personality and you're so dynamic. And so I love that you're growing this business. I think that's why you're growing. You have such a great, skill set, but also a wonderful personality, and you care so deeply about your clients. And I've seen that from the get-go ever since I met you a few years ago. And so I think that's really nice. And
it's interesting though. It's interesting, Shauna, right? Like accountants you've nailed it, right? Yeah. And traditionally accounting firms and accountants say, we're not business owners, we're not entrepreneurs, we're just here to give advice or to process transactions and file taxes, that's where we're different. Yes, we are world class at doing that, but we want to take that to the next level, which is where I get excited, right? Helping people really change the world.
Yeah. And I love what you said about, how in order to make an impact, you have to be financially sustainable. And I have seen that even in my own business, how much of a struggle that can be when you get kind of in a position where you've like screwed things up financially, right? And so I think it's so important for people to understand this from the get-go. It's been a pain point for me, and it's been a passion for me to help teach people. I don't personally, obviously I recommend people like yourself, but I think it's so important for people to understand the principles right off the bat and get themselves set up properly right off the bat within their means and within their resources. But I think starting little and building that out as you grow makes the best sense and puts, it's just like having a really firm foundation under a building, right? So I know I'm preaching to the choir.
No, it's good. It's always
no, but those are pieces of advice that people need to hear, right? And it actually might mean more from you as an entrepreneur who isn't a finance expert, but that's exactly the reality, right? When you get your finances under control, you have this new confidence.
Yep.
Right. And you can understand and see the patterns that help drive success. And when you become clear on that, then you can take your business to an all new level. And that's what I love about it. So great insights there.
Yeah.
You mentioned, seeing the patterns and whatnot. I was thinking to myself, considering your background and what you've been doing, you've been able to see the consistent themes and patterns where people go wrong on a regular basis, and knowing that you want to help people makes me think, okay, well, you're actually very, very well positioned to understand the pain points of all entrepreneurs, regardless of like their focus, whether it's tech or small retail or whatever. So, I mean, did that lead into your entrepreneurial journey? Like how have you leveraged that to kind of like, create the passion to create your entrepreneurial journey? Like how did that help you get there?
Yeah. So probably the biggest, I was always entrepreneurial minded, right? I remember being in university and going, I'm graduating business school with 1,000 other people. How am I going to differentiate myself from all of them, right? If I'm going to find a job, because I didn't think of starting my own business right out of university. That wasn't my mindset. I was more so, I want to gain experience and knowledge so that I can really change and have a massive impact. And I remember being in university going, this is one area that I'm really good at, is this accounting and finance piece. I really get it. I can really understand it. And to the point where I was helping teach some of the lower levels and helping tutor a lot of my colleagues in the class. So what I thought is, maybe if I get this finance expertise locked down, that would be a way for me to differentiate myself in the entrepreneurial community, knowing full well, like Shauna said, the traditional accountant is relatively quiet, introverted, give me a problem and I'll solve it, which I'm also very good at. But going out there and changing an industry and saying, you know what, guys, we don't need to be sitting inside our box. Let's get outside of the box. Let's help people instead of just being transactional experts. But Devon, what I would say is probably after I'd started my own business, which was obviously the kickstart to the entrepreneurial journey, I actually got recruited by Tony Robbins, which was a pretty big moment for me. I remember Tony's CFO and his investment banker showed up in my boardroom. And I think at the time I had 5 employees. So like you can imagine the office space. It was an old house that we had renovated, and it was great. But I had a CE or a CFO of a large global organization and an investment banker trying to get me on board with one of the biggest names in the world. And of course, you know, this was a try it out sort of situation. And I traveled with Tony for 3 years at all his business mastery events, and learning from, and I think this will go in line with a lot of the questions that come up, but learning from some of the top advisors and entrepreneurs and thinkers in the world. What a great experience. And that just made me shift from being, you know, maybe a local business to being, I say North American because time zones are a real piss off for me. Dealing with the other side of the world, it's really, really tough, especially with the family. But, you know, I look at it now that it's, especially in the last 12 months, entrepreneurship doesn't have boundaries anymore, right? Communication is online. It's, you know, things have changed, but probably working with Tony really changed my mindset to really think bigger and think like a global entrepreneur.
Amazing. Such a great story.
Yeah, I didn't even know that about your
really?
Journey. Yeah. How did I?
How long have we known each other? I can't believe, Shauna, I didn't tell you this.
I know.
That's great.
I know. That's amazing. Well, I agree. I mean, I think that ties into just the whole, you know, exactly why people are listening to this podcast right now or watching it on YouTube is, you know, we always have to be learning and growing from people who have done it, who have gone before, who have the knowledge that we don't have yet. And that's a huge part of being a business owner is there's this constant education that you have to be doing. Because, you know, I always say to everyone, every business owner comes in and they're very good at building their widgets or selling their, or doing their service, whatever, providing their service. But they don't necessarily have the skills to, you know, do the legal or do the accounting or do the HR. And so it's so important. And at an early stage, you don't necessarily have the resources yet, the financial resources to afford all of it. So you have to do a lot of it on your own. And that's why it's important to be learning all the time. And then as you do grow into that position to be able to afford it, you get there. And I think that's, you know, this is just a perfect opportunity. So I love that you know, worked with Tony, because I mean, wow, what an incredible man he is, and his team and all the people he brings into his sphere of influence is incredible. So
cool. Like Jay Abraham, Keith Cunningham, you know, Phil Diamandis, like or Pete Diamandis. Yeah, like the best of the best, right? Mm-hmm. And you just continuously get inspired by those people. And to your point, Shauna, you know, I think this year I'm probably spending definitely 6 figures, maybe upwards of 200,000 on personal investment and learning, right? Because the more I can learn, the more I can help other people. Right. And just listening and learning from those that have been there and done it is like, if you want to get somewhere faster, follow the footsteps of those that have done it. Take their guidance, and it's incredible, right?
Yeah, it's so true. I think when I first started my business, I didn't learn that lesson quite quick enough. But
that would be all of us, because we don't have the resources to invest at the beginning, right?
That's right.
You know, you're starting out your business, you can't invest $100,000 in learning from people. But when you get to the point where you can, you don't want to stop, because you become a sponge. And you know, there's 1%, you know, if I can take 1% of what I'm learning from those that have done there and magnificent entrepreneurs around the world, if I can take that 1% and implement it in my business and make it better and change the lives of those that I serve, you know, that's a remarkable journey.
I agree. That's incredible. All right. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to get a little bit tactical with you so we can learn from you, get our people learning from you, just as you've learned from others. So in the beginning of a business, when someone's first starting out, what are some steps that you can recommend that they take to set up proper financial management right from the get-go, before they have any resources, before they're maybe even generating revenue? And as
So the very first thing I would make sure everyone considers is the right structure. So whether you're in Canada or you're in the US, looking at it and saying, should I incorporate? Because incorporation can protect you from liability, protect your personal assets. So maybe you haven't got your business going, but you might have a house or you might have other assets that you want to protect. And for $1,500 to set up a corporate structure, it might be a really good idea, because the one thing that I do know is that we're all not getting into business to not be financially successful, right? We want to get into business to be financially successful. And one of the big areas that I see in the very beginning, in the first 12 months, is that people have quick success and then all of a sudden they have tax problems. Right. So the very first thing, even before starting, would be consider your structure and know the outcomes of that structure. Make sure it's the best fit for you. The second piece I would say is get yourself set up with an online cloud accounting solution. So our favorite solution, I don't know if you have sponsors that are no online. Well, here, maybe you should go after QuickBooks, because QuickBooks is the dominant player in this market. There are other players for sure, like Wave Accounting, which is a great free source of accounting solution if you're just getting started. But QuickBooks, if you get into a cloud-based solution, it plugs right into your bank account and it pushes all the transactions right in for you. And all you have to do is say what they're related to, and all of a sudden you have up-to-date records. Because if you are an entrepreneur starting out and you plan on managing your business by your bank account, that's the wrong plan of attack, right? If we're just saying, well, we must be doing okay because there's money in the bank, that doesn't mean that you don't owe people money or that you haven't missed paying invoices. What it also doesn't mean is that you're collecting all of your money, right? You might invoice out $100,000, but if you're not collecting your money, how do you know? How are you tracking it? So the number one piece of advice would be to set yourself up with a simple cloud-based solution. Keep your records up to date so you know exactly what's going on. Because like we started out this podcast with, the numbers don't lie. Right? The numbers don't lie, and they show in their patterns where people like me can go in and say, this is what's happening. This is how you make it better. Right. But if you don't have those numbers up to date, you could find yourself in a real mess. And then you get past the point of no return. You're into the next year and you're like, that's okay. Don't worry about tax filings. Let's just keep making money, keep selling things. And you might get yourself in a bit of a hole. So number one thing is make sure that you have clarity over where you're at. Get yourself a cloud-based solution.
That's great advice. I've used Wave before. It's great. And I was thinking about everything you said, and I'm a photographer, and I do a lot of collaborations. I work with a lot of people that are focused on the creative aspect of things. And there's a lot more conversations about money and having contracts and how we actually go about these partnerships, which is good. But there's still that lack of thinking about this before it's too late, just as you mentioned, and but with some people, I've even gone and said to some of my friends and colleagues that no, at least start with Wave, at least start there.
100%.
That being said, there are still people that'll set things up as you described and have Wave and have it connected to their account, and maybe are sending their invoices out and trying to keep track of things. But still, with the basic setup, what is kind of, you must see it. People do come to you. What is maybe the one mistake or one or two mistakes that people are doing that you're seeing even though if they have a little bit more knowledge that to get themselves set up? Like, what's the one thing you're seeing that's coming?
Yeah, aside from tax, right? Like, I think structure can be an issue. What I would say is a lot of people don't understand how sales tax works. And I say sales tax because, again, if we've got a North American audience, right, in the US, we need to make sure that if we're selling something or we're delivering a service that we know if sales tax is applicable, right? And in Canada, the one thing that we see which becomes an issue is that sometimes, and there's two elements to this. The first one is if you're a small supplier, you're exempt from charging HST or GST, depending on the province that you're in. But once you hit that $30,000 threshold, you need to register. And what it means that you have to register is at that point, you have to start charging and collecting. Otherwise, if you're not, the government's going to come and take it out of the money that you have deposited, right? So that's one. And number two is a lot of times when businesses are starting out, the intention is to get more than 30,000, right? We know that the intention is to get our sales more than 30,000. And yourself, like even a photographer, you probably have tens of thousands of dollars of equipment that you need to go and deliver those services, right? So right out of the gates, you've got, let's say, $20,000 and you're paying HST on that product, where if you registered for HST right out of the gates, you would get all that HST back, right? So one of the things is if you have a capital requirement, meaning that you have to buy equipment or furniture or vehicles or whatever, make sure you register early, because any HST or GST that you pay, you're going to be able to get back right away. So that'll help with your cash flow. Because if you miss registering and you go too far along the path, you won't be able to go back and get that GST, HST back and recover it.
Bob Gauvreau, everyone. Instant value.
We're just trying to give value right out of the gates, right?
That's amazing.
Instant value and applicability. That was great. Yeah.
That was awesome.
Very, very tailored to some of my friends in that audience as well. Awesome.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously, you know, I've been very transparent about, you know, how we've built our business and, you know, the mistakes that we made right out of the gate. A lot of these, almost every one of them. And, you know, and it's no fun. Like, it is the worst, most stressful experience when you're trying to like go back and remember everything and set it, you know, and then have to set it up properly. And it's literally like my living nightmare. So if I can implore people to not get into that position, I definitely recommend it. But yeah.
But let me say this, Shauna, because I know that there's many people who feel like that's their living nightmare, right? Mm-hmm. And we probably get one person in a week who's 5 or 6 years behind in their business stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I just want to clear up is that, you know, don't feel embarrassed that this is where you're at. Like for those people who are in that position, let's just get it solved, mm-hmm. right? Let's get it solved now versus a year from now, because the longer you go down the path, the more, you know, interest or penalties or whatever related to it could be burying you mm-hmm. Along the way. So for so many people, that is exactly what happens. You get an idea, you start selling it, right? You're maybe not tracking it. You're getting e-transfers into your bank account, mm-hmm. and it just keeps going that way. You use the e-transfer to pay the bills and everything goes along just fine mm-hmm. until we hit the end of the year. And then you go, oh man, I think I'm supposed to do something. And this happens all the time. Yeah. So, you know, it's just a matter of saying, okay, I'm not the first person who's gone through here. It's not embarrassing. I've been trying to build a business. Now I just want to get my affairs in order so I don't have to worry about anybody coming after me down the road.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, that's why I try to be really transparent about that, because I do know that it's not an uncommon situation. And I see how easily it happens, you know, for someone, right. Even for someone like myself, who was normally very, you know, diligent about all of that stuff. And, you know, you just get, like you say, you just kind of get buried and then you get behind and then you get, you know, it just becomes like a mounting issue. And, but yeah, once you do get it solved, it becomes like this huge relief. And then you can move forward and make decisions so much better. And your business becomes so much more sustainable and all of the things that you've said. So I'm just backing you up.
It's all good, though.
If you need a cheerleader, I'll follow you around anytime you want.
I would love that. That'd be great.
Anyway, okay, so yeah, I guess let me look at where we're going here. So we're trying to get through some of these technical things, and I think, you know, it's really, you know, we've really seen some, you know, great advice. I guess one thing I'm always curious about, especially right now during the pandemic, and I know that this podcast will maybe live on beyond this time, but, you know, through challenging periods of time, I guess we could say, or periods of austerity, how can business owners find resources that create tax advantages in their business? And I guess in Canada, I don't know, maybe you can speak to the US a little bit. What are some of those tax advantages to consider and what to look for?
Yeah, and you know, back in March of 2020, when everything happened, it was interesting because, you know, some people can either hide away from it or they can face these challenges head on. And for me, you know, the one label of the last year has been uncertainty. Right? Nobody was certain as to what was going to happen. Is our business going to be able to stay open, doors physically? Are our clients going to stop using us? Are our employees going to be able to work? Right? It was just so many logistical things that nobody had ever dealt with, not in this century anyway. So no living people have been around to see this sort of situation. And one thing that we did right out of the gates is we jumped in and said, okay, all resources that we know are available, we're going to continue to just hit you with this every single day. So we created a Facebook group called Vision to Results. And so if you're looking for, I'm just going to give a little shot there. If you're looking for ongoing resources, we've got stuff in there anytime, especially if it's, you know, pandemic related or government resource related. We're putting updates in there all the time. Which would be super, super helpful, especially if, you know, you haven't taken advantage of some of them. And I know we're going to talk about some of them, but definitely being able to search that in our Facebook group would be a really great resource. So one of the things that we did when uncertainty arises in our business lives, I think there's 3 things that we need to focus on. The very first one is survival. Right? Looking at the challenges that are ahead of us and saying, okay, let's pause and make sure that we're protected. And the very first thing that we said was, if we're looking at survival, what does that mean? Well, in a business, that means you have sufficient cash resources to sustain a time without any cash inflow, right? So looking at that and saying, we need to make sure that we have enough cash so we can continue to pay our bills, our fees, whatever it is, without potential money coming in. So we focused on cash and we said, all right, if we are a business owner right now, what are the ways that we can get cash? One, we can start taking deposits for future work. We can start accepting payments in all forms, whether it's credit cards, whether it's PayPal, whether it's any online payments, whatever, e-transfers. Let's be open to every sort of form of payment. Yes, there's a cost associated with credit cards, but increase your prices to cover it if you want to, right? But don't worry about it, because what you want is not people owing you money. You want to make sure that you have that cash. And then we look at another side and we say, okay, financing resources. When COVID hit, the banks opened up their doors and said, here's resources for us as business owners. BDC Bank in Canada had billions of dollars that they were giving out for working cash flow for small businesses, and still are. And we're huge advocates for the BDC because they are the entrepreneurial bank in our opinion. Many of the primaries are as well. But what they have is an online loan application for up to $100,000 that you can get in your bank within 5 business days, right? Wow. So if you're looking for cash flow and making sure that you're secure and you're safe, there's access to resources like that, right? So looking at financing and saying, here's my assets. Can I pull some equity out? Can I get access to cash? Because as soon as you have cash, you're protected, and now you can focus on the future instead of being reactive.
Right.
The second piece we said was, let's look at the environment and let's see how this is going to impact us and see how we need to adapt our business model, right? Because business model for me, this might be a bit of a tangent here, but a business model is really made up inside, like from a financial perspective, we've got revenue coming in and we've got 2 types of costs. We've got costs that are directly related with delivering that product or service, right? So if you're thinking of a computer, you're selling a computer for $2,000, you're buying it for $500, that's a direct cost to providing that. Maybe there's labor that comes in that's directly incurred in order to provide the sale of that computer. So there's those costs, and then there's our fixed costs, which are the ones that are almost the same every single month: our rent, our insurance, anything like that that doesn't change whether we scale our business or not. So we need to understand how that works so that we can understand what our break-even point is in our business. That is what the number of revenue is we need to sell in order to cover all of our expenses.
Right.
So looking at our financial model and saying, how is this uncertainty going to change that? How can we actually take advantage of this uncertainty and make it more profitable, make it stronger? What we don't want to do is make sure is wait too long while we watch our expenses continue to stay high and our revenue go away. We need to make decisions fast. So that was kind of the second element of it. And I think the third
right there. Sorry about that. Just like a quick question popped in. for that second element, it's a great, reevaluating the financial model or the business model from a financial standpoint. That's
Totally.
great. When you're offering that advisory, or when you're telling your clients to think about something like that, are you offering support or advice in saying, like, this is the number you might want to, squeeze yourself down to? Or are you also kind of adding a suggestion as, like, considering what I know about your operations, you might be able to change these practices? Because I assume you're seeing the number attached to what things look like. So when you provide that advisory, are they getting both ends? Or are they just getting, like, do what you got to do to get the number here? Like, how do you kind of approach that? If that's not too granular, sorry. I know it's a bit tangential.
Yeah, no, which is fantastic. And a lot of times when we take on a new client or a new relationship, especially in someone that I'm coaching, a lot of the times what we do is the very first session is going through and saying, here is your financial model, right? If you want to be profitable or more profitable or extremely profitable, these are the small areas that you can improve upon, right? And, Keith Cunningham, when I used to hang out with Tony, Keith Cunningham was essentially his finance expert. And Keith is amazing. If you haven't checked out Keith, he's the best, in my opinion. So one of the things that he talked a lot about is, growth is not really that important if your financial model is broken, right? If just growing an existing problem is just a bigger problem. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we want to do is make sure that that financial model is working first before we grow and scale. Because if you are putting the investment in and trying to grow, it could just be more headaches for less money. We need to make sure that, again, that this is set up the right way. So one of the things we do an initial assessment that says, here's your revenue, here's your variable costs, here's your profit margins, here's your fixed expenses. This is your break-even target. So this is the minimum sales you need to make in your existing model that will not lose you money, right? You don't get out of bed and not hit this target, because otherwise you're not financially sustainable. Mm-hmm. Right. And then we look at it and we say, how do we tweak this model so that your break-even target drops, right? Your required sales to cover all the expenses drop. And then now that we're a more efficient model, how do we crank it up so that now you're starting to grow your business? And maybe it's not through taking on more customers. Maybe it's selling more to your existing customers or offering more solutions to your existing customers. Maybe it's increasing your pricing because of the value you're delivering. So we look at all of those things and say, this is where you're at right now. It may be sustainable, but this is how we make it better. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things we do.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so back onto number 3. So survival.
Survival, adaptation, and then the third one was really getting ready to position yourself for future success. Because what we all know about uncertainty, whether it's the markets, when the markets crash is the best time to invest, right? The same thing is in entrepreneurship when there's so much uncertainty and, cash flow concerns and resource issues and staffing concerns and everything in the business is really challenging. Those people who are ready to retire they're going to bounce, right? They're going to say, you know what, I don't have the energy to recover from this. I'm going to exit. And in those moments, either there's an opportunity to purchase, which is why we have our cash resources available, mm-hmm. or there's an opportunity to capitalize on new consumers entering the market. And again, when the market is down, there's opportunity to go in there, grab that market share so that when you're positioned right, you can really grow, scale, and take advantage of real extreme financial results. So that was one of the things that we had kind of positioned, right? Get safe, learn from it, position yourself for opportunity, because, now's the time really for so many entrepreneurs to capitalize on the opportunity of the world.
That was awesome. I really, really like that position yourself for future growth. And Sean and I actually talked about that and been doing a couple things to, try to capitalize on some of the opportunity that 2020 has really put to the forefront of everyone's mind that, are always there, but are that much more, potentially lucrative, or, have the ability to scale so much because of how the markets have changed. But it's interesting to hear what we kind of think about in certain ways packaged so well, thinking about how you kind of position that. I'm like, oh, this is where we're at. It's okay. We can give ourselves a little pat on the back. And sometimes we don't necessarily know that that's what we're doing. And I think you've done a really good job. And I can only imagine that you probably offer that value really, really packaged well that people can kind of see it and understand where they're going to go trajectory wise for their future, you know? So thanks. That's
Totally.
awesome.
And it's small tweaks, right? And this is, you know, when I think of the financial model, and we go back to that and adapting to the changing environment or adapting to uncertainty, you go, it's just small tweaks. We don't need to hit it out of the park. But if you take 2 or 3 areas and you just crank it a little bit tighter, right? More efficient processes, eliminating non-essential expenses. I don't know about you guys, but I have multiple CRM platforms. I actually talk about this where I've had 2 ongoing and I only need 1. And I have 2 and I've continued to pay for it. And then I've just added a 3rd, which I actually do need. It's got a better component to it. But you go, how many of us have bought into monthly subscriptions for software or something that we could cancel? And yeah, it might be $20 a month, but it could be $2,000 a month once you add it all up. Like tweaking those small little things, adjusting our pricing strategy, right? Looking at that and saying, instead of charging $500, I'm going to charge $600. That's a massive increase in our pricing. And that's going to result in bottom line profitability. And you know, one of those small tweaks I would say for me personally this year was looking at the ability to communicate with people that it drastically changed. I've been on Zoom for 3 years, but getting the other side, getting the consumer on Zoom in a traditional business model, like we work with a lot of construction guys, we work with a lot of online coaches, but the construction guys weren't on Zoom until March of last year, right? Predominantly. And now they were forced to do it. And when they were forced to do it, that meant that they didn't necessarily have to go to the CPA down the street for tax advice. They wanted the best CPA who they could communicate with, and it didn't matter where they were. So it was such a massive opportunity for us. But that's just a tiny tweak in the financial model, a tiny tweak in our strategy. And all of a sudden, we're on the fastest growing companies list.
That's incredible. I think you're so right. I mean, even myself in this past year, I moved to Vancouver Island, and I've gotten more clients in the past year than I've ever had, and they're all over the place. And, I do want to thank the pandemic for that one thing, although...
Right. But Shauna, but that's because you adapted to the uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
And, for us, I never thought I'd be able to serve the US market, which is, 10 times bigger than the Canadian market. And now we do financial coaching with entrepreneurs down in the US, which is a huge discount for them because we charge in Canadian dollars, right?
Of course.
And so, but it's amazing because now we can reach more people and have a bigger impact on changing the entrepreneurial world, right? So, and same with you. It's such an amazing opportunity that you can go live in the space that you wanted to, right? That you were dreaming about. That wasn't maybe so much a reality, Vancouver Island, when you thought you had to be in Toronto, because that's where the massive market was. But now the market's so eager to communicate in this way that we can do it. Like I had my first meeting walking outside today.
Yeah.
I had a coffee walking down by the lake and I'm going, this is amazing.
Excellent.
I know.
Yeah.
I laugh
and
at
now
my,
we're in love with time zones. We're in Mountain Time, Pacific Time, Eastern Time. Yeah, it's great.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. My insurance advisor, she walks up and down the golf course. She lives on a golf course in Thornhill, and she walks up and down the golf course all day long, every day. And she puts in like 20,000 steps or something crazy like that. And just does her meetings, and, it's incredible. So I know, I guess being adaptable is obviously a huge part of being an entrepreneur. And, when you go through these challenging experiences, you do have to make those, changes in order to, I think a lot of people sort of are like, oh, I'm just going to wait till it gets, done or it's over, and I'm like, I think we have to figure out new ways and it's whatever you're comfortable with as well. But certainly, the financial making those financial changes. I know that's something that I did too. I looked at all my subscriptions, and I think I had something like $1,200 a month between like Zoom and Face, like all the different things that I had, all the services that provide. And I'm like, okay, we're not using this right now. We're going to be, once we get back to, doing larger events and communicating more widely, we're going to be using those again. So let's put those on hold for a few months and, you know, making those little changes. I think I brought it down to something like 200, you know, or 300, you know.
Right. And there's $12,000 a year back in your pocket.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Without changing anything, just eliminating some waste.
Yeah. And, you know, just understanding that I don't have to have all the, you know, fancy things that I wanted.
I understand.
I'm actually not that fancy of a girl. Anyway, well, I think this is such great advice. And I know in Canada, especially, I'm not as familiar, obviously, with what's happening in the US in terms of, you know, the government support and grants and different things. I know our government's been quite generous, hopefully not to our detriment down the road, but we'll see. But I guess, you know, what are a few things, you know, this is sort of our Canadian content piece, which we'll just talk about for a few minutes. But what are some of the grants and the opportunities? I know you've touched on them a little bit, but maybe kind of dig into those a little bit more that are available to people right now.
Yeah, and so the one I did talk about was BDC, the $100,000. I think that's, you know, if you need working capital, there's a few pre-qualifiers. You know, you have to be an existing business, you have to be financially viable, and COVID has to have impacted you, but you can get access to that capital really quick.
Yeah.
So if you need, you know, up to $100,000, that's probably the fastest way you're going to get it. As far as the government goes, they've, like you said, they've been quite generous, and they scaled some of it back, but they continue to offer it. So the very first one that was available to all business owners under certain circumstances was a wage subsidy. So right out of the gates, they offered a 75% wage subsidy if your revenue was down over the previous year by 30% or more. So what happened in this case is a lot of businesses were down like 30, 35, 40%, but they were getting 75% of their wages recovered, and they were actually doing better than they were the year before. Right. So when the government finally caught on to this, they changed it. Probably, I think it was around August, September of 2020. They made it so that, you know, the percentage of revenue that you're down, that would be the amount that you would be eligible for. But wage subsidy is certainly a big one. If you're down any sort of revenue, make sure you get access to that. If you haven't, there are deadlines related to it, so you want to make sure you jump on it pretty quickly. Yeah. Another one that is really, really great was the CEBA, the Emergency Business Account, Canadian Emergency Business Account. So initially they offered $40,000. If you had $40,000 of non-deferrable expenses, which meant, you know, payroll costs, it meant supplies, materials, insurance, rent, any of those costs that were essentially we can't avoid going forward. If you had more than $40,000, you were eligible to get this $40,000 loan. And if you paid $30,000 of that loan back by December 31st, 2022, they were going to forgive $10,000 of it. Right. So that was the initial. And then right at the end of 2020 and available now, they bumped that $40,000 up to $60,000, and they made, you know, of that $20,000, they made 50% of that, or an extra $10,000, forgivable as well. So as it stands, you can get access to this loan, $60,000 if you have non-deferrable expenses in there of $60,000 or more. And if you repay $40,000 by December 31st, 2022, they will forgive $20,000 of it. So what a great way. And some businesses go, well, I'm not sure that I want to take on that debt. And you go, yes, you do. There's $20,000 that they're going to give you at the end of it. Yeah, and, you know, some people have been hesitant to claim some of the grants, going, you know what, we're okay. We don't need to get access to this. Yes, you do. Get access to these. They're available to you. They've said, here's the outline, here's the parameter. If you qualify, it's meant for you. And do some, if what you want to do is not jeopardize the future of anybody else, grab this money and go out and do something impactful with it, right? Nice. It doesn't mean don't get it, but, you know, use that to have more impact in your business because you qualify, right? Yeah. They set the parameters, not you. So right. I think that's super important.
Yeah. Really cool.
And then there's another one that they created that was a rent subsidy. So for anybody who's got a long-term lease and a lease in place, you are going to be eligible to get a rent rebate of up to, I think it was 70 or 75%. I think it was 70%. and the landlord was going to get a rebate up to 50%. So if the landlord dropped your rent down below 30% of what it normally was, they were going to be able to recover 50%. So that's something that's available too. They continue to tweak that. And to be honest, I don't even know what the most current details are, but just know that if you are a tenant and you're paying rent and your revenue has dropped, you may be eligible to seek this sort of recovery from your landlord. The only challenge has been that it's a landlord specific application. So I know of a few people, including a local mall, that I have a restaurant friend, a massive space, and the landlord of the mall has refused to apply for this grant, which I think is extremely short-sighted and detrimental to our economy for them essentially being lazy. They're saying it's a legal contract, and that super frustrates me because they're not thinking long-term that the sustainability of this tenant is super valuable to them.
Right.
You know, as a landlord, help your tenants out, right? If you've got the opportunity to help subsidize them, keep them afloat, helping their impact, right? And minimizing the pain and suffering of your own business in the long term, you know, go out and help them with this sort of resource as well. So those would be the big ones that Canada has. Now, I know the US has very similar. They've got their PPP as well. And I think it's predominantly driven based on your wages as well. So, and being eligible is very similar to our wage subsidy. And again, I think their deadlines are coming up soon too. So don't wait too long if you haven't done it. That's my knowledge of the US is I know what it relates to. I don't know the amounts. The document was way too big, but I know it's available. Seek the advice that you need to make sure you capitalize on that.
All right. That's great. That's great. Well, I think people can definitely take that and figure it out if they haven't already.
Plus, there'll be links in the show notes, so not to worry.
Yeah, we're going to be linking anything, you know, like you said, your Facebook group and different people you've recommended, Keith Cunningham and that sort of thing, in our show notes, and so people can check that out. I think we're kind of coming to the end here, and you've just, you know, given us so much to think about and so much great value. But if you could give a business owner a piece of advice, what would it be?
Yeah, this is always a tough one, and this one comes up a lot, right?
It can be more than one piece of advice, or however you want to say it.
Yeah, and you know, I would say let me go with one big chunk. I would say if you are a business owner, whatever stage you're at, whether you're just starting out or whether you're already financially successful and you're wanting to go to the next level, the best way to get to the next level is to find the people and work with the people who've done it or have done it with other people and learn from them, right? Invest in that knowledge, because I can tell you, you know, the entrepreneurial journey is so much test and react, right? Does it work? Let's try this. Does it work? Right? You know, what's so much easier is finding somebody who's already done it and saying, how do I do it? Teach me how to do it. Because so many of our small little failures, which is going to happen, right? We're going to be facing so many small little failures along the way. But if we can get to that next stage of our business quicker, that's by finding those people who've done it. And, you know, maybe that's one piece. Maybe I'll throw in a second is make sure that you have financial clarity over what's going on in your business, because the numbers, like I said, they don't lie. And you can use the past to predict where you're going in the future. Not necessarily your revenue. That's a whole different animal. But if you understand how your financial model works, you could work with somebody like a financial expert, for example, who can help map out your future pathway to success and help you realize ultimately intergenerational wealth inside your business, which is very, very exciting, right? If you can take care of the next 10 generations of your family by being financially successful, doesn't mean that they don't have their own level of success, but if you can provide for them and provide them with the opportunity to jumpstart their careers or their own entrepreneurial journey, you know, what a great way to do it. Find those that have done it, map out your pathway to financial success, and create intergenerational wealth.
I love that. It's so true. I see
Excellent.
so much of that with the family office network and how that's, impacted so many generations of people, and huge value there. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, that kind of wraps us up. I'm so grateful that you were here. Before we leave, can you just maybe share with our audience where they can find you, and we'll also put that in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. So on any of the social platforms, we're at Gauvreau CPA, which is GAUVREAU CPA. And one thing maybe I can show a quick plug to is my book, The Wealthy Entrepreneur, which is available on Amazon and everywhere else, really.
Awesome.
But Amazon's the biggest one. It's available on our website. Those would be the biggest ones. And from any of our corporate handles, you can find me. Would be happy to, I know we talked about financial models. We would be happy to review that with anybody if you were looking to take your business to the next level.
Incredible. Well, we will put all of that in the show notes, and we'll certainly link to your book. And I've heard.
It's on my list. It's on my list, Bob.
It is actually. I know. I haven't read it myself.
Tell me about it earlier on, so I was like, all right, we're gonna grab that. Yeah. So.
I know.
Yeah,
we were both
absolutely.
talking about it. Well, thank you so much, Bob. This has been great.
My pleasure.
And thanks everyone for tuning in and listening to the Startup Gambit. And we will see you next time.